How much work is there to run for city council?
Way more than I ever thought. I really didn't think that it would be as demanding on my time. But this is taking every moment of every day that isn't already booked. And I had no idea what I was stepping into. But when you feel inspired to do something, whether that's from your divine or from your internal intuition, I just go, do it now. Because you never regret those things. The regrets come when you say, man, I shoulda. And I don't want to get to the end of my life and say I should have done anything. I want to go for it now.
What inspired you to run for the city council of Henderson, Nevada?
4 of our 5 council people have consulting companies. It's not against any ordinance or law for them to provide consulting services to development companies that will stand before them and ask for permission to move forward on a development. They should recuse themselves from the vote, but there's a group of them that one will recuse themselves and the other 3 will pass it. It only takes 3 to pass in a council of 5. So projects are just happening. You can see it right back there. There's a 3 Kids mine, and that's a toxic site that the federal government owned. And the federal government didn't want to clean it up because it was going to be too expensive. They gave the land to the city, and the city did a deal with developers. So right now, there's arsenic, asbestos, lead being remediated. Hopefully they're doing it well and keeping the water on it and keeping the dust down. But look, my mom died she was a downwinder from northern Arizona from nuclear testing. So I understand that our government can kill people. So I'm running to just bring some common sense back in.
So I'm curious, for anyone in their own city who wants to get into politics, what should they expect in terms of, I know it's going to be different.
Sure.
But ballpark, how much should they expect to have to spend, and how difficult is it to really get into?
It does take money. And it depends on your size and scope of your city. But here in Henderson, it costs a lot of money to do this. And that's come from me and my wife and people who are donating to me in mostly very small amounts. So you do need to raise funds, and that's intimidating, keeps people out. It's really hard for me as a business owner to go to somebody without providing them a service and say, donate to me, please. Why do you have to raise so much money? Because there's campaign laws, and they need to be changed, especially for city government. There's 3 incumbents running right now. They've raised almost $1.5 million between the 3 of them. 90% of their money has come from the developers. So if I'm a developer and I have 30 LLCs, I can give you $10,000 per. Now I'm going to stand before you and ask for approval on a development. What are you going to say? Well, it gets one step worse. I can also hire you for an undisclosed amount of money. That just has to go away. Here's the last thing I'll say on it. Please get involved in city politics. That's where you should start. That's probably where you should stay. But I think all government, all positions, including our congressional members at the federal level, we need term limits on everybody. And it needs to not be a career. So if you've if you're truly serving, you should serve and go back to doing what you do, right? That's a public servant. But what happens is people serve and then they become a lobbyist for $1 million a year, and they use all of the connections that they made in their time in politics. It's a slimy deal.
So the 90% figure that you mentioned, that 90% of the contributions are coming from these, is that public knowledge? Like, you could go online?
You can go to the Secretary of State and you can look up any candidates. There's financial disclosures which tell you what companies they're involved in. And then their C&E is a quarterly report that has to be done. And you can see them. You can go, it's all public record.
Any last words of advice you would give to someone who wants to run in their own city?
If you feel inspired to do it, because you should do whatever you feel inspired to do. It's an internal compass that causes us to go in a direction we're meant to go. And too many of us second guess that, right? Malcolm Gladwell wrote a great book called Blink. And most of us know in the blink of an eye what we should and shouldn't do, and then we spend the rest of our time trying to talk ourselves out of it. So if you feel inclined to get into politics, do it, but be wise about it.
Say you do win, and we're hoping you will, right?
Thank you.
And over time, how would you prevent yourself from being tempted?
As a person who decided at the age of 17 that I wouldn't drink or do any of the dumb things, I started using drugs when I was 12. And I had an addiction issue, and I had to stop. And that's a very young age to become an addict. As somebody who has drawn hard lines There are things in my life I will not do. The decision's already been made. And I'm the same way. It's not a boastful statement, and I'm not casting any judgment on anybody any different, but I made a decision to be married to Mona 36 years ago, and I've been true and faithful to that woman ever since in every way because the decision was made. It's when you don't make a decision, when you kind of keep ideas open, when you kind of say, well, we could talk about that. It's when you start expanding the edges of your morals that you can be compromised. And bottom line is I don't want to do this. Is not my living. I want to affect some change, and I want to come back to full-time pickleball.
What is the secret to a successful relationship?
Cook and clean, fellas. Cook and clean. Okay.
I'll have to edit this section out.